from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media, and happy to be here with you this Monday night. There's a lot of news out there. If you want to give us a call and talk about some of it, feel free, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. And a poll that came out over the weekend shows Trump with a double-digit lead over Biden. That's how it's being reported by Fox News. Listen to how it's being reported by the Washington Post. WAPO ABC poll, Biden faces criticism on economy, immigration, and age. A finding that shows Trump leading Biden by a wide margin does not match other recent polling, however, suggesting it is an outlier. When their poll doesn't have their guy looking good, they say it's an outlier. I got to tell you, it's their own poll. It's so funny. But that's the story. Let me give you some numbers on this. Here we go. So the Washington Post and ABC News released a poll on Sunday, which found that if the 2024 presidential election were held today, Trump would win 52% to 42% over Biden. Yep, you heard that right. Trump wins by 10 points if the election were today. Respondents also held a poor view of Biden's handling of the economy and the U.S.-Mexico border, in addition to his age. Would you look at that? They don't like Sleepy Joe. Anyway, the Post downplayed the results of its own poll after it showed Trump with such a commanding lead. And I read you the headline from both of these because I like to be like Fox, fair and balanced. And now, what's funny about this is that Trump's the guy that's 4 times indicted, twice impeached, facing, 71 felony counts, 400 years in prison, or 91 felony counts, forgive me. I mean, it's just laughable. And Joe Biden's the guy squeaky clean. He's never done anything wrong, right? He's never done anything wrong because there isn't a politician out there who's ever done anything wrong unless it's Trump, right? Or is there another one, right? I think there's actually news that we talked about. We had a guest on it and everything last week. Yeah, Senator Bob Menendez, a United States senator who's been indicted for bribery. Yeah, we talked about that. And he came out swinging. You know, he took to the microphones today to say, I am innocent until proven guilty. Now, what's funny is him and his wife were indicted. And he didn't say, we are innocent. He said, I am innocent. I thought that was really telling. But I want you to hear Menendez talking about how he earned all this money. Because, you know, when they found money stuffed away in his clothing, just packs of cash, gold bars, all sorts of stuff given to him by people that he's done political favors for, which, you know, for many suggests that there may have been a bribe there. Lo and behold. Anyway, Menendez was there saying, look, I have lawfully earned this money as a senator. Listen to this.
For 30 years, I have withdrawn thousands of dollars in cash from my personal savings account, which I have kept for emergencies and because of the history of my family facing confiscation in Cuba. Now, this may seem old-fashioned, but these were monies drawn from my personal savings account based on the income that I have lawfully derived over those 30 years. I look forward to addressing other issues at trial.
All right, so there's Senator Bob Menendez again. Now, he was investigated federally a couple of years back, and there was a hung jury there in New Jersey. Then now they're doing this out of New York, and it seems to be a more serious case. Now, what I think is important is the fact that we have to take some sort of heart in this, right? Now, there's 2 sides to the coin. I don't want to underestimate this. So it's my supposition that Bob Menendez, and I take exception to some of his stuff, but he's always been pretty good with Israel, pretty good on Iran in terms of, being against the Iran deal for the most part, realizes the threat that autocracy brings because he's, son of Cubans. But he's, definitely left of center. So there's a lot of issues we don't see eye to eye on. And I met him years ago. Wasn't the nicest guy to me. So be that as it may, I do realize that he's a difficult cog in the Washington, D.C. bubble. Obama and him didn't have a great relationship. Some suggest that Joe Biden is Obama 2.0. If that's the case, then maybe Joe Biden doesn't have a great relationship with him. I don't know. What I do know is that if you want to get rid of Joe Biden, this is a good stepping stone, right? To say, there's a Democrat politician out there that's facing corruption charges, and it looks really bad. That to me sets the stage to say, first it was a senator, next it was a president, right? We happen to catch this guy with 20 different shell accounts, all giving money to the same, 4 or 5 people, last name Biden. And everything kind of led back to Hunter and Joe. So I think we'll continue to unravel that stuff. But it seems to be like the writing is on the wall that somebody somewhere in Washington is actually doing the right thing, even if they're doing the right thing for the wrong reasons, for some sort of political motivation or payback. Well, what's interesting in this case is that while Menendez is maintaining his innocence, and that's his right, one of his colleagues in the lower house, my least favorite Congresswoman from the Bronx and Queens, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, all out crazy herself, she decided to go on Face the Nation this weekend, and she wasn't as complimentary as some have been for good old Bob Menendez. Listen to what she had to say about the good senator.
Senator Bob Menendez of New Jersey, as you know, has just been indicted on bribery charges. Should he resign? And what do you think of his statement that it has to do with him being a Latino?
Well, I think the situation is quite unfortunate, but I do believe that it is in the best interests for Senator Menendez to resign in this moment. As you mentioned, consistency matters. It shouldn't matter whether it's a Republican or a Democrat. The details in this indictment are extremely serious. They involve the nature of not just his, but all of our seats in Congress. And while, as a Latina, there are absolutely ways in which there is systemic bias, but I think what is here in this indictment is quite clear. And I believe it is in the best interest to maintain the integrity of the seat. I want to emphasize that all people they must be extended the presumption of innocence until proven guilty.
So there we have it. AOC all out crazy. She says, well, we might have to protect his seat by getting rid of him. He should resign. I love it when this happens. Honestly, there's zero confidence in him right now. They're just after the power. She follows up with saying, obviously, he's innocent until proven guilty. But she doesn't come to his aid or defense or anything like that. She goes straight in for the kill, saying, look, we need to protect that seat in New Jersey. Otherwise, the Republicans will take it. It's soft. It's a soft target. So all I'm saying is things are looking up, right? Things are looking up, even if they're for the wrong reasons, whether it's for her political expediency, whether it's or the Democrats' political expediency, or if it's another bigger political move to start setting the stage to maybe indict Biden on something that looks ugly, or at least use that as a threat and say, look, we got Menendez. We can come after you, too. It's time for you to take a hike, old man. Maybe that'll happen. Who knows? It seems to me that the Democrats are behind pushing Biden out. And that's why these polls are coming out from the Washington Post with Trump leading by 10. If Democrats didn't want that to happen, it wouldn't happen. When the media says negative things about Biden, the media is setting the stage for a softening of Biden, for an exit of Biden. Anyway, straight ahead, I want to talk about what's killing America. And, what's going on with the radical left and why and how are they continuing to destroy so many of our cities? We're going to do that with Jason Rantz. He's coming up next. Plus, your calls a little bit after that. 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, welcome back. And we're talking about this poll with Joe Biden. Trump is up by 10. Biden's down by 10. And he would lose today by 10 points. That's remarkable to me that this is coming from the Washington Post. And speaking of Washington, I want to talk about Seattle, Washington also in a moment. But I want to bring in our guest. Jason Rantz is a big-time talker in Seattle. You see him on the Tucker Carlson show back in the days all the time. I think he was the most frequented guest on the program. He's a terrific broadcaster, and he's got a brand new book. We're going to talk about that as well. We're going to do a deep dive with Jason Rantz, and he's here with us. Jason Rantz, welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you so much for inviting me back. I appreciate it.
You bet. So we were talking right before you came on. We were talking about this poll, the Washington Post poll that has Trump ahead by 10. And of course, in their subhead, in the of the actual poll in the article in the Washington Post, they put that, well, it's clearly an outlier, but it still suggests that people are uncomfortable with his policies and his age. And I thought it was funny, but I try to read between the lines sometimes, and I think, WAPO is putting out a poll against Biden that it's definitely something the Democrats want out there. It's not them just being honest journalists, or do you think I'm wrong?
No, I think they do want it out there. I think there's a lot of panic there, particularly when it comes to the third parties. There was a story today about that. And now, Hillary Clinton is warning the Biden camp about that, and they're kind of freaked out. And so this kind of jarring poll, and yes, it is very clearly an outlier. However, it does continue to keep the trend in the direction of Trump, right? There's no doubt about that. All the polls show it either tied or him up by a couple points. Now, I believe if he's down by 3 points, it's a winner for him, because I don't think polls are very good at reaching Trump supporters, and I still think there are people who don't want to say that they'll end up voting for Trump, particularly if they're independent or moderate Democrats, because they know what life has been like under Joe Biden. They don't like it. And if this is the wake-up call that the Democrats need, so be it. I don't know if they're going to really be able to respond, because they're still handicapped by their guy. He's not a strong candidate. People don't want him on the top of the ticket. And they continue to, frankly, just lie about what everyday Americans are experiencing and witnessing. You can't tell us Bidenomics when people are struggling. You can't tell us there's no border crisis when now you even have Democrats calling it out.
Oh, I think you're 100% right there. And it's not just Bidenomics and the border crisis, but all of that kind of leads into crime that's taking over so many big cities. In New York City, you've got crime that is being managed. I mean, the cops are being very, very active, thankfully, but it's still out of control. People are on mopeds running around like madmen. And it's not exclusive to New York City. I mean, I saw this article last week, your part of town. The Seattle City Council voted 6-3 on Tuesday to recriminalize public drug use. And when I read this, I thought I was reading The Onion, or Babylon Bee. And they're going to give the city attorney's office the authority to prosecute these crimes. Now, if you decriminalize this, obviously you're inviting public drug use. And now that it's rampant and destroying humanity, now you say, oh, you know what, maybe we should go back to prosecuting this crime. I think pro-crime progressive prosecutors that coddle criminals are literally destroying the fabric of our society. What was the logic behind this?
Well, one might say it's what's killing America, which is a good portion of my book is focused on all of this. I mean, so you've got several different issues at play here. For one thing, just to be clear about what Seattle did, they didn't really recriminalize. They took a step in the right direction, there's no doubt, a few years ago, the state Supreme Court in Washington, which is very, very far to the left, legalized drugs by declaring unconstitutional our felony possession law. And as a result of that, all the state legislature had to do was add one word to the law, which was knowing possession. Knowing was the word. They chose not to do that because they wanted to give decriminalization a try. You had Oregon basically do the same thing, except that was done via an initiative. And it's been a total failure. So 2 years later, after record high overdose deaths, the city of Seattle decided to move forward with a new state law that basically said, okay, you can now prosecute. They're not going to prosecute because we don't have enough cops to implement, and we don't even have the full policy. They passed a policy that doesn't actually exist yet. And what they've signaled is that they're going to give multiple shots to people to escape any kind of consequence if they indicate an interest in drug treatment. I believe in drug treatment over criminal penalties unless a serious crime has been committed. But there are people who are just choosing not to engage at all with the treatment that's being offered. And they just continue to create more victims out of the crimes that they're committing. At the same time, you have DAs, again, not just to your point, it's not just in certain cities. It's happening all across the country. Prosecutors are just refusing to prosecute. And you've got judges who aren't very judgmental. And as a result, you've got all of these criminals who are able to escape any kind of consequence. And guess what? All that does is embolden them to continue that kind of behavior. And ultimately, they take a step further and further and further until ultimately they end up committing a crime that they're not going to be able to take back.
Man, I tell you, it's I love talking to you because you always have the skinny on everything, and the way things are presented, you'd think that they're out there, trying to make a difference, and it sounds like they're not going to make any difference. That this was just some political sleight of hand.
Yeah, I honestly, in the short term, I don't expect anything is going to change. Now, long term, again, step in the right direction. We'll see how this next council election goes. We have all the incumbents, their positions are up. Not everyone is running again. And we can take a step again in the right direction, or we can go farther to the left. I'm cautiously optimistic, but I've been burned by that optimism in the past. So I'm just going to wait until November and see where things go. But I mean, when you look around the country, some cities have taken that right step and others have not. You look at San Francisco, where they booted from office their DA, Chesa Boudin. They recalled the school board directors. But then you have Chicago, which went with Brandon Johnson, who is farther to the left than Lori Lightfoot. So depending on the community that we're talking about, there are some glimmers of hope. But part of the reason why I wrote What's Killing America is I don't think people are connecting the dots on their own. I think that it's really easy to fall for some of the progressive nonsense, the talking points that they put out there, because on paper, oftentimes it sounds very virtuous and like it's actually possible and even innovative, but they're failing. And if you don't know what specifically is failing, you just know the end results, you're not going to be able to change anything.
Well put. Folks, we're on with Jason Rantz. He literally wrote the book on this stuff. It's called What's Killing America? Inside the Radical Left's Tragic Destruction of Our Cities. We're going to get into the book straight ahead. Stick with us. Jason Rantz is our guest. I am Rich Valdez. It's America at Night. Don't go anywhere. Don't move a muscle. We are coming right back.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. And we're talking about a stunning new book about how America's biggest cities are being destroyed by progressive policies and woke Democrats. A lot of Americans really don't know how badly the biggest cities that are run by Democrats are really deteriorating. And too many Americans have been complacent for way too long, assuming that the craziest elements of the radical left would stay confined to the East and West Coast. But crime, addiction, homelessness, left-wing school indoctrination, so-called inclusive housing policies, outrageous taxes, and so much more, they don't stay in the big cities like Los Angeles, Chicago, Portland, New York, Seattle, San Francisco. The effects of the left-wing ideology that we see out of there is spreading like wildfire, in my opinion. And it alarms me, and it should alarm you too. Now, Jason Rantz is a big-time radio host. He's a journalist. You see him on Fox News very regularly, and he's written this book. He's breaking it down, and he was there on the front lines. He's in Seattle, and he's with us now. Jason Rantz, welcome back. Let's dig into the book. I'm reading the introduction here. The book is called What's Killing America? Inside the Radical Left's Tragic Destruction of Our Cities. Jason Rantz, what was the impetus for you in particular, being that you're already out there writing articles, you're on TV, you're on the radio? Why did you want to write a book and chronicle all of this?
I wanted to write a book because ultimately, whether we're talking about radio or television, there's only so much you can get into in one segment. Yeah. And when we have seriously a country that's on the line, I think it deserves just a deeper dive where it can, all the information that you might need in order to help save your individual city is just there for you. It's spelled out. There are many instances in which we will notice what's going on. Homelessness is out of control. The drug crisis is out of control. Fill in the blank, because so much is out of control. But you won't necessarily know why it is the way that it is. Local media does not connect dots for individuals. They'll do very transactional stories. Here's the latest crime that occurred. Here's when it occurred, and then they move on. But they don't say, actually, this could have been prevented had we not passed this piece of legislation, or had we not, at the prosecuting attorney's office, decided to adopt this strategy. And as I was saying, if you don't know the what behind everything that's happening, you're not going to be able to argue to rescind those laws, walk back those strategies. If you don't know why the radical left believes what they do, it's very hard to have a true debate, an actual argument as you're talking with your friends and neighbors about the future of your community. I can go outside right now. I'm in New York today. I can go outside, talk to 10 random people and ask them what harm reduction is. Mm-hmm. Not a single person will be able to tell me. Right. And yet harm reduction is a strategy that is responsible for the drug crisis that we have in this country, and it is being implemented in every single Democrat-run city, county, and state. It's adopted by the Biden administration. I can do the same thing with Housing First. No one knows what that is, but guess what? It is why we have a homelessness crisis that's out of control. And it's happening in all those same exact places, and it's being implemented nationwide by the Biden administration. How do we fight back if we don't know these things? How do we fight back when we don't know how to read or sort of decode the language of the progressive left when they're pitching their so-called compassionate ideas and innovative ideas? You're not going to be able to win the battle unless you know what it is we're dealing with. And so what's killing America just basically gives you everything you need to know in order to understand the current crises, why we're experiencing them, what actually works, and how we can start winning these battles.
Jason Rantz, I want to make sure people get out there and buy a copy of the book, What's Killing America? The Radical Left's Tragic Destruction of Our Cities. And I want you to dig into the two examples you just made because I think they're interesting, harm reduction and housing first. I have never even heard this term housing first. I have heard of harm reduction, but for the audience, explain them.
Yeah, so let's start with housing first because this is the main policy that we're dealing with. Housing first means, as it says, we put a homeless person in housing first, and then we go after whatever was the reason for why they were homeless to begin with. On paper, it sounds great. I mean, they're homeless, they're without home, let's give them a home, and they're no longer homeless. The problem is they don't actually treat the underlying condition. This is all called low barrier housing, which essentially means there's no condition of entry. So long as you're not violent, if you are an addict and that's the reason why you're homeless, you can still use while in the subsidized housing. There's no mandate that an individual gets the treatment that they so desperately need. And so what you end up happening is that they're just still kind of homeless. Nothing's really changed except we've put them on a government subsidized housing program forever, which doesn't help them, doesn't help the community, because it's not like they're staying in their home. They're still leaving the house and committing crimes. And then, of course, the only people it benefits, the homeless industrial complex, which is making a ton of money to keep these people in the housing. Now, harm reduction, very similar in that we're trying to reduce the harm of illicit substances. So rather than have someone share a needle, which can pass bloodborne disease, or share a crack pipe because of the bacteria, we hand them out clean versions of that. So we're basically enabling their addiction.
Right.
And again, they'll tell you that this is, well, you got to be where they are. You got to go to them first. And then when they gain trust, then they'll take you up on your offers of treatment. They don't offer the treatment. And just I directly quote left-wing, radical left activists talking about harm reduction, and they don't even really hide it. That they don't want to stigmatize drug users, so they don't want to offer treatment because it might be too judgy. They'd be too judgmental. And ultimately, we're just killing these people. And it's immoral. Our tax dollars are going to it on top of that. Right now, chances are 97% of the people listening right now have their dollars going to purchase crack pipes, clean needles, or something called booty bumping kits, which was a blast when I got to explain that on Fox News the other day.
Wow. Well, we'll do that in the next segment, folks.
Don't Google it, folks. Do not Google.
It might scare you. What's Killing America? Inside the Radical Left's Tragic Destruction of Our Cities. We're on with the author, Jason Rantz. And again, this is stuff I think we know, but we just don't know all of the details of it. I think you've spelled it out really, really well in this book. Check out the book, get a copy, get an extra copy to give to a friend that needs to know what's going on in America. The book, again, What's Killing America? Inside the Radical Left's Tragic Destruction of Our Cities. Jason Rantz is the author. We're coming right back with him. Don't move a muscle.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. This is America. This is Night. This is Rich Valdez.
All right, familia, welcome back. And you guys remember a couple of months ago over the summer that there was a story that came out that said that there were crack pipe vending machines. I think they were in New York City, and they sold out of crack pipes within hours of being placed in public, display. And I thought to myself, man, that's crazy. But when our guest, Jason Rantz, the author of What's Killing America, Inside the Radical Left's Tragic Destruction of Our Cities, when he mentioned that in addition to some of the crazy products that people are handing out in our government to help people, like clean syringes and crack pipes, there's also something called what kind of kit was it, Jason Rantz?
Booty bumping kits.
What do you do with those?
Okay, so it is so you get a syringe, you remove the needle, you fill it with water and meth, and you inject it rectally. And apparently that is the quickest way to get a really significant high. It's an indication that someone is very, 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 very desperate and very addicted. And rather than help that person, we are giving them the tools that they need, taxpayer funded, to continue. And no one really knows about that.
Wow, I've never heard of such a thing. The last time I heard of something like that was when college kids were taking boxed wine and, going through the back door. And I thought that was crazy. I was like, what? The things kids are doing in college. I'm only 45. I never heard of such a thing when I was, in that age. Anyway, that's crazy. So these people are injecting themselves in their rear end to try to get more high than they normally would get with this rectal dose of methamphetamine. That's absolutely crazy. And this is something that the government is helping and supporting.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, this is going on all across the country. People don't realize how bad it is. And oftentimes when they find out, they're like, oh my gosh, how did we allow that to happen? Well, it's because you didn't know. And you don't know what you don't know. People have families, they have lives, they've got jobs. It's hard to pay attention to all of this. And so that's another reason why I wrote What's Killing America. And, it's broken down into two sections. So the first section is crime, homelessness. These are the policy choices and laws that impact our everyday lives. And then part two focuses on how the policies are forcing us into certain kinds of lifestyles. So the truth about EVs and the cost to electric vehicles and how it's never going to truly work out. The war on cars, the war on housing, all of these big issues get their own chapter so that we can, again, just see what's going on all across the country. And I hope people realize bad policies spread. They don't stay in these big cities. It's not Las Vegas. What happens there doesn't stay there. A horrible policy in Chicago ends up getting statewide with cashless bail. A horrible policy in Seattle ends up going statewide with a ban on vehicular pursuits by police. We have countless examples, and that's not even getting into the education system and how it's been corrupted by the radical left. Until we truly understand what's going on, we can't fight back. And I guarantee you, folks, there's no escaping this. Don't think that you're living now farther away from D.C. or Atlanta or L.A. or San Francisco, that it's not going to follow. It follows.
This is not very heartening news, Jason Rantz. What's Killing America? Inside the Radical Left's Tragic Destruction of Our Cities is his brand new hardcover book. This book hits the shelves tomorrow. You can pre-order it now and get the guaranteed price. I'm looking at Amazon.com, but you can get it wherever you want to get your books. Again, What's Killing America? Inside the Radical Left's Tragic Destruction of Our Cities. Jason Rantz, I know that you can't give everything that's in the book away. You got to leave us wanting more. But give everybody listening a good synopsis of what they're going to take away after going cover to cover on this book.
I think what people will take away first and foremost is they're going to be disgusted and astonished at what's been going on that they didn't know about, myself included. Like when I started to do the research into my immigration chapter, just hearing some of these horror stories that people in this country experienced, or going into education and gaining access to a whole bunch of secretly recorded videos and audio clips of teachers, like what they were saying, I was blown away. And I have a fairly high bar of what shocks me because I do this for a living, as
Sure.
do you, right? We're surrounded by this stuff.
Yeah, usually you're disappointed, but not surprised.
Exactly. So when I get shocked, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is bad. So I imagine people will take that away. Then I'll be honest, they're going to get angry. They're going to get angry that this is happening without their permission, without their consent. But then ultimately, I think they're going to feel optimistic that they can now do something to change the direction. We are not too far gone. Well, I think there's some cities, unfortunately, I think San Francisco is at this point too far gone. But understand, in this book, I'll take you through the fights that recently the left took on against the radical left, because I don't think it's Democrats are the problems. I think radical Democrats are the problems. And liberal San Francisco pushed back. I just think they waited a little bit too long before they got rid of Chesa Boudin and the school board directors like they did. And what I fear is going to happen is that too many people will finally realize what's going on in their big city, small city, mid-sized city, then decide to push back. But by then, it'll be too late. And so I want to give people the tools that they need, the knowledge that they need to be able to fight back ahead of time. And as our friend Mark Levin will tell you, it's not easy as a conservative author to get any kind of promotion outside of talk radio and Fox News. And so there's been a nice little concerted effort to make sure that the books don't end up getting promoted. And so please, again, go online to purchase, call your bookstore. If they don't have it, ask them to order it. All of that matters. And first week sales are the most important. And the book goes on sale in just a couple hours.
Folks, you heard it best. I was actually with the great one, Mark Levin, yesterday, the day before yesterday, and it is tough to push books out there, but when you make some noise, people know. And if you're listening and you care about America and you want to share this with somebody, I recommend giving one as a gift, keeping one for yourself. What's Killing America? Inside the Radical Left's Tragic Destruction of Our Cities. I'm getting a copy for myself. I want to make sure that you guys get one too. Jason Rantz, tell everybody how they get a copy of the book.
So you can go wherever it is you get your book. So from Books A Million and Amazon to Walmart and Barnes & Noble, Target, if you dare. They're available everywhere online. And then again, in most major bookstores, you'll see it. Feel free to give them a call to make sure they have it before you make the trek. And I would appreciate it.
You bet. Follow him at Jason Rantz on social media. Jason Rantz, you're a gentleman, a scholar, a patriot. I thank you for being here. I want you to give a shout out to Jason Antebi and all of the KTTH family for me. I haven't been on in a while.
Absolutely. We will.
Bet. All right. Take care, my man. Folks, there is more to come straight ahead. We'll continue with your calls and more as we move forward. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
I want to listen to you, Rich, all the time.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
The polling right now for 2024 for the presidential race is tied. Is that something that surprises you or worries you?
No, it doesn't yet. I mean, we're a long way out, and I think there is, a kind of looking and almost shopping mentality in voters. Like, oh, who am I going to have to vote for? And wait a minute, I'm not happy with that. They're never happy with what the choices are. I've seen that for many years.
Well, no duh, Hillary. And, of course, that's Hillary Clinton with Jen Psaki on MSNBC over the weekend. And I keep bringing up this poll, and not because it's favoring Trump, but because of how the Washington Post portrayed it when their perceived guy, in my opinion, they want things to look favorable for Democrats most of the time. And when they don't, I believe it's because it's the beginning of a hit job. It's not honest journalism. They don't really do that. And even though they did it, they had to put a caveat on it saying, well, it's an outlier and blah, blah, blah. And, something Jason Rantz mentioned, too, is that while it is an outlier, it is definitely what they want people to know. There's a lot of concern with Democrats over Biden, and you're starting to see it in polls. And I think it's encouraging to me because I'm seeing it at all different levels. I don't always get to speak with everybody, but the people that I do speak to, I just ask. And, I have a friend I've known since high school. She's been my attorney in the past, and every now and again we'll talk. We don't see eye to eye on anything. Matter of fact, she was an attorney for an organization that represented Black Lives Matter, but she's a very old friend of mine. And every now and again we'll talk about politics. And something she mentioned to me was, I said, well, what about your guy, Joe Biden? And she said, please, that's not my guy, all right? She's like, seriously, we don't need people that old in the White House and blah, blah, blah. And she had been concerned for a long while about his age. I'm talking maybe like two and a half years ago. So this is a real thing that's affecting liberal Democrats, progressive Democrats. There's a lot of disdain out there, and people are concerned. So we're going to see what happens while we're out there shopping. And by the way, Hillary, that's exactly what you do. Right? You're always shopping for a candidate. You want to see who's going to really be the best representative of your values in the White House. That's literally how voting works. That's why we campaign. Anyway, folks, more to come straight ahead. We're going to talk healthcare, the headlines, your calls, and more. 833-4-VALDEZ. Don't move a muscle. It's Rich Valdez. We'll be right back.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. And our phone number, if you want to join us on the air, feel free to join the program, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. This is our number 2. If you're just joining us, welcome. And you've got families that are in crisis as the cost of specialty drugs continues to go up. And we're going to dig into that. But it reminds me of how Joe Biden's out there, and whenever people push back, because inflation, you're not doing great on the economy, he starts with, it's working. I remember his little whisper campaign saying the Bidenomics is great, and then they'll start talking about how they're working diligently to lower the cost of insulin and this, that, and the third, which are important and great, but they don't address the issues that are being presented. Now, Karine Jean-Pierre, she goes off on a tangent talking about drug prices and everything else under the sun about Bidenomics, saying that, no, we're bringing prices down on just about everything. Listen to this.
This president has been so zeroed in, so laser focused on lowering costs for Americans, and we've done that. And a lot of the policies that the president has put forward are indeed popular. I mean, Bidenomics has worked so well that you have Republicans in their own districts, in their own states, taking credit for things that the president pushed forward, policies that the president has pushed forward, legislation that they didn't even vote for. If you think about the American Rescue Plan, the Inflation Reduction Act.
I don't know where to start. This president is so zeroed in, she says. I'd say this president is a zero. But popular policies? I don't know which policy is popular of Joe Biden's. He's losing by 10 percentage points to Trump in this poll that came out yesterday. I think he's underwater by almost 70%, 60, I think it's 66%. Of Americans don't think the economy is going well, and they disapprove of his handling of the economy. So I don't know. I don't see the popularity of it, but you know what? I want to bring in somebody who knows more about this than me. She is an ophthalmologist. She's a physician. She was a congresswoman from New York, and she's our guest right now. Nan Hayworth, welcome to the program.
Rich, it's a privilege to be with you, and I guess, the message from the White House is, and from all the Democrats who are asked these questions, because of course they're all being asked, and it is that Americans just don't understand how good we have it. It's like, don't believe your lying eyes. Don't believe what you're experiencing in your life. Somehow you don't understand. It's amazing. And
it's not me, it's you, right?
Right. Yeah. It's somehow, it's always that way with our colleagues across the aisle. Somehow we haven't messaged it right, they say. We haven't reached into people's fantasy lives enough, and managed to negate what they're seeing in real life, experiencing in real life. And certainly, apropos of what you mentioned in terms of our topic together, Rich, there is, and speaking as a physician, of course, too, there's a lot of opportunity to do things better in terms of relieving the extraordinary cost, especially of specialty drugs and biologics, the things, frankly, that you see advertised on TV all the time these days, and they are costing U.S. citizens, premium payers, and taxpayers a lot more than they really should.
Well, let's talk about these specialty drugs in particular. What are these drugs in particular, so that we can have a fair understanding? Absolutely.
So, as I mentioned, Rich, if you turn on any TV station these days, and by the way, they're amazing medications. Things like Humira, for example. Pretty much every medication you see now advertised for psoriasis, for skin problems, for GI problems, people who have inflammatory bowel disease, Crohn's disease. You see there have been so many special molecules, and they're big molecules that are made by our bodies in various ways, or are adapted from molecules that we make in our own bodies. But they're big molecules. They're miraculous to manufacture. They're very different from what we had a couple of generations ago, which were the smaller. And of course, a molecule is a teeny tiny speck of chemical, basically. But what we have, insulin is a fairly small molecule. What we give for hypertension, for high blood pressure, very important medications. Most of them are small molecules, but big molecules that we use for immune problems. That of course are highly prevalent, and we didn't have good treatments for them 20, 30 years ago. And now we do, but they're very expensive to purchase and to administer. And some of that is understandable, but unfortunately, a lot of it these days is avoidable, and it hasn't been avoided yet.
So when we're looking at the cost of these going up, I guess it's some of it is the recouping of research and development that has to get back in, since it's a more complicated drug. But is that why the price is going up, or is that just why it's expensive? Is it inflation? Is it a scarcity issue? Why is it increasing?
It's a great question. Research and development for any intervention medically, and I, of course, know this well, and I have worked with the pharma industry for part of my career. And the research and development is definitely very, very expensive. The United States has some of the highest standards in the world for evidence, although, interestingly enough, and it's a whole different topic, but COVID vaccines managed to skirt some of that testing, and a lot of us docs have been pretty troubled about that. But in terms of these biologics, they do have lots and lots of testing, and that's great. But the challenge is that and of course we do incentivize the development of these miracle cures by allowing patents, and of course everybody's heard of patents on all kinds of things. The United States has had patents on things that people invent ever since this country was founded. And that's a way of allowing inventors, and in this case, of course, pharmaceutical companies, allowing these inventors to benefit from the work that they have done. And that, of course, encourages others to do the same thing. And, then they too will benefit, and the world will benefit from whatever they produce. But it's also possible for, and in fact, it's all too tempting, and it is done, for these pharmaceutical companies to use patent law to have market positions that allow them to charge an awful lot of money for these medications for decades, instead of, say, a reasonable period of time, 10 years or so. It can be extended to 30 years when and in fact, in the case of Humira, that's pretty much the case. And that's one of the things we talk about in this piece I wrote for Real Clear Health. But there are competitors who would like to, introduce their products, their molecules, so-called biosimilars, for a lower price. And, they should be able to do it. It's a reasonable thing to do. But for, manipulation of the legal system by the pharmaceutical manufacturers, and not actual, new innovation or anything that, would warrant it, these biosimilars are having trouble entering the U.S. marketplace. In Europe, it's a much different story, interestingly enough. And European patients and those who pay these things, European taxpayers, depending on how their countries pay for medications. Most countries have forms of government support, taxpayer support. They benefit from that. But in the United States, we have not really been able to do that yet.
How much of this can we blame on Biden in terms of the cost and the red tape?
I'd like to say everything. I'd like to say everything because he is sadly at the forefront of a lot of terrible things that are happening to the taxpayers and workers and families of the U.S. now. But honestly, Rich, this is a problem that's been going on for a very long time. So we can't really blame President Biden for this. But what we can do is encourage all of our policymakers, both sides of the aisle, and the pharma industry. And again, if you're in Congress, you've talked with folks from the pharma industry, and it's okay to talk with anybody. We lobbyists are part of what we do, but really to try to encourage our members of Congress and our senators to take steps to allow some legal reforms in the patent industry that would make it easier for less expensive versions that are identical in terms of what they can do for our bodies, to allow those to enter the marketplace faster. There's a great organization called FreeOp, and it's headed up by the really smart scholar, and I'm sure you know him, Rich, Avik Roy. And FreeOp and Avik Roy have written some great pieces analyzing just exactly what we need to do in our healthcare, in the way, and look, it's inevitable, Rich. The ideal solution to any pricing problem is to open markets more. So, fundamentally, that's what we want to do. But we know that the government, the U.S. government's always going to have a big presence in our healthcare. So there are ways that we can change our regulations to allow innovation to happen more easily, to allow a variety of products that are more affordable to compete with, the first to market patent holders after a reasonable period of time. And right now, unfortunately, we don't have that. But if we encourage our members of Congress and our senators to pursue that kind of thing, then that'll be better for all of us. And of course, President Biden could be a champion for it too. Right.
This is one of those things where whoever jumps on board first gets to win and take the political clout that comes with it.
And you're right, Rich. And it's a complex subject, so it's a challenge for the people who pay out of pocket for these medications really know what we're talking about, and there are folks who don't have insurance that may pay for some of these medications, and they're paying for them themselves, and they really feel that pain. For most of us, insurance covers a lot of the cost. There are some patient assistance programs, but the general cost to Americans as a whole runs into the many billions of dollars.
Well, I want to talk about that in the next segment, if you don't mind. And I just want to remind everybody that we're on with former Congresswoman Nan Hayworth. She's MD, medical doctor, and we're going to talk about this debate and the red tape that exists between bringing biosimilars into the marketplace versus, not doing that, and how it's affecting Americans and in their pocketbooks as well. Folks, stick around. If you have a call, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
So the battle for more affordable options, whether it's biologics or biosimilars, continues. And the big issue is Big Pharma wants to make sure that they make their billions because they need those billions to continue to do the research and development to come up with these wonder drugs. And, of course, competitors want to come in and give a more affordable option. But with so many of the manufacturers of these biologics filing multiple patents, it makes it difficult for competitors to come in because they're protecting their investment for as long as they can. And I guess the question becomes, how long is long enough and too long? How do we regulate that? And that's why we're talking with former New York Congresswoman Nan Hayworth. She's a medical doctor and is explaining this to us. And in the minute or two we have left, Nan Hayworth, how do we fix this?
Well, Rich, it's going to take, I think, probably patient advocacy groups, especially, all of the serious diseases, and there are so many in this country, chronic diseases, those sorts of conditions that people suffer from for a lifetime. Autoimmune diseases, of course, are classic for that kind of challenge. So most of these patients will have advocacy groups. And I think really advocacy groups in this country can help spearhead, the kind of urging that we were talking about a moment ago. We really do need from the federal level, we need to change the way patent law works for these sorts of medications, because frankly, patent law opportunities were altered through probably advocacy by the pharma companies to make sure they could use, patent after patent after patent to extend their advantage beyond when it's reasonable to do so. So to make sure that when insurers and patients pay for these medications, that the government isn't creating artificial incentives for the prices actually to be hiked, because that actually happens the way some of our in Medicare pricing rules work in the United States. It's a perverse incentive. You can actually, that unfortunately, raising the price of medications and biologics can actually, unfortunately, benefit folks other than patients, and yet, not because they've done anything better, those who are hiking prices, but just because they can. Wow. So these sorts of artificial incentives on the part of government that allow what effectively are abuses. Everybody wants to see innovators incentivized to do more of that. We all want to have a great pharmaceutical industry, and we can have all of those things, but in fact have even more innovation if we can break down some of the barriers to new and more affordable versions of these products coming to market faster.
Nan Hayworth, a pleasure to be with you, former Congresswoman from New York. Nan, let everybody know how they can find you and follow you.
You bet. Well, thank you, Rich. I'm on Twitter, or X now, at Nan Hayworth.
Excellent. Stay tuned. We're coming right back.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
President Biden today, he's at the White House. He's got some hip-hop legends there, and he butchers their names. And he butchers lots of things. I mean, that's kind of what Joe Biden does oftentimes. He is a butcher of sorts. And Biden's not the only politician. Earlier we were talking about Bob Menendez and this big bribery thing. And ultimately, the Biden administration, they kind of specialize. And I'm going to really expand that to the Democrats in their entirety. And many politicians, honestly. It's not always a partisan thing. But they make sure they protect themselves. And right now we've got a proposal from the Biden administration that's insulating themselves from accountability. And they're protecting the bureaucrats from ever being responsible for the things that they do. Yet, with the police and with other things, they want to take away any type of qualified immunity, but they just continue to protect themselves more and more. And I want to get to the bottom of that because this is, I think, A, of import, and B, something that people just need to know. So we've got former special assistant to the president for domestic policy, and he's the current director of the Center for American Freedom at the America First Policy Institute. James Sherk is our guest. James Sherk, welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
You bet. So tell us a little bit about this proposal that the Biden administration is putting forward to insulate themselves and the bureaucracy from accountability.
Happy to. So as you probably know, it is almost impossible to fire a federal bureaucrat. It's not completely impossible if you jump through enough hoops and do everything exactly right. It is possible to fire a bureaucrat, but as a practical matter, you can't really do it. Once or twice in a blue moon, but on any sort of regular basis, the federal bureaucracy has very solid job security, and they know it and they like it. And shock of shocks, the federal bureaucracy is made up of human beings who have their own policy preferences and their own views about what the government should do, and they bring those views, with them to the table when they do their work. They're human. It's very understandable. But you combine that with these very solid job protections, and what you find, and certainly what we found in the Trump administration, is that career bureaucracy, when they did not like the policies the president was pushing, they did not, simply stand up straight and salute and say, yes, sir, we'll do it to the best of our ability. They tried to undermine those policies and sabotage those policies and push what they wanted to have done. But they weren't the ones who were elected by the American people. They weren't the ones appointed by the person elected by the people. They're career bureaucrats who had a job to do. And so what the president did towards the end of his term is he he signed an executive order that said, look, if you're a career bureaucrat in a policy influencing role where you have the ability to shape the direction of the federal government, you don't get these civil service protections anymore. If you want to act like a political appointee, then you will get the same job protections as a political appointee. And if you try and undermine the democratically elected president's agenda, then you are not going to be in your job for very much longer because guess what? You're not protected anymore. It was a very bold move. It was something that no previous presidents had tried to do in the modern era. Washington went nuts and flipped out, and as you might imagine, the bureaucracy did not like it very much. And then Biden, after he took office, rescinded it within a few days of him becoming the president. Now what Biden has done is he's proposed a rule that would basically say if Trump wins the election in 2024, he can't bring this back. This is regulation that basically says if you're in one of these policy influencing roles and you invoke the legal authorities President Trump invoked, well, guess what? You still have your protections. You're still insulated. You're still not accountable to the president and thus not accountable to the American people. It is an effort, a very transparent and blatant effort, to insulate the federal bureaucracy from accountability to the democratically elected president.
Well, this clearly emboldens what many call the deep state or the federal bureaucracy, the permanent Washington, as I've heard it been called. And it begs the question, why would we remove any form, and clearly the Washington swamp is not a meritocracy, but why would we remove any form of a merit-based system where there could be repercussions for not doing your job right, if it not to cover up misdeeds?
Well, I think broadly speaking, what's going on here is the bureaucracy and the Biden administration are very much in tune with each other. To a larger extent, I'm sure there's individual exceptions, but as a broad generalization, the federal bureaucracy likes the Biden administration agenda and did not like the Trump administration agenda. And so they don't face the same sort of conflict in the bureaucracy that President Trump faced when he was trying to drive change. To take one example, in the Department of Justice, they did an investigation and they found that Yale University was engaging in rampant racial discrimination against Caucasians and Asian applicants for admissions. And so the the Civil Rights Division, the people tasked with suing over these sorts of civil rights violation, the leadership decided, hey, we are going to file a lawsuit against Yale University for this rampant racial discrimination. And the career staff, the career lawyers in the Civil Rights Division, understood full well that winning this lawsuit would undermine affirmative action programs and racial preferences in higher education. These are these sort of racial preferences, which the Supreme Court recently recognized are unconstitutional, are very unpopular among most Americans. I mean, white, black, Hispanic, Republican, Democrat, pretty much everyone by large margin says this is appalling. But among the career staff in the Civil Rights Division, they strongly supported this sort of racial discrimination and racial preferences. And so they said to the Trump administration agency leadership, we're not going to help you with this case. We are not going to work on this case. You want to do that? Have fun. We're not going to be any part of it. And so in the end, they were able to bring a case, but they had to do it by basically reassigning lawyers from other divisions and using political appointees to bring it, because the career lawyers whose job it is to file lawsuits to protect Americans from racial discrimination thought that this was the sort of racial discrimination they approved of, and they weren't going to do anything to combat it. Now, you can, for one or two cases, do the sorts of things they did, reassign employees from different divisions, use the small number of political appointees. You can do it for one or two cases. You can't do it systematically. If you have laws that the career bureaucracy say, not so much, then the political appointees cannot enforce it for them. There's only 4,000 political appointees out of over 2 million, career civil servants. Right? There's just not enough. And so, to a large extent, what the Biden administration, I think, is trying to do is lock in their policy preferences. If you can't fire the bureaucracy, and the bureaucracy is in line with what Biden wants to do, and they're not in line with what a different candidate might want to do, then what that means is whether Biden wins the next election or doesn't win the next election, his policies will continue to be in place, and his policies will continue to be what the bureaucracy does. Because as long as the career civil servants can say to the political leadership, not so much,
right,
then who's in charge?
Right. Clearly not the people and not even the executive branch, because the bureaucracy's already been protected. I just want to remind everybody that we're on with James Sherk, former special assistant to the President of the United States during the Trump administration, and he's now with the America First Policy Institute as their director for the Center for American Freedom. And we're discussing how bureaucrats are protecting themselves. The swamp is making itself stronger and excluding any weigh-in or accountability from we, the people. We'll continue to talk about that and see the role that civil service plays in all of this as we continue to work through this topic. Of course, your calls are welcomed, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
By the way, your ratings are up. Congratulations. I had somebody. It's always nice to check. I like to see, even if they're friends, I like to see how are they doing. Are people listening, right?
That's
but
right.
You're doing great.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, welcome back. Let's go to Cumberland, Maryland, to WCBC and check in with Frank, who's calling in. Frank, welcome. You're on with James Sherk from America First Policy Institute and me. Go right ahead.
Mr. Sherk, I have to take issue with you that it's difficult to fire a federal employee. I was fired quite easily, and because I got on the front page of the Washington Times pointing out that black employees where I worked at the Social Security Administration had a benefit that was denied to white employees, namely a Black Affairs Advisory Council. Just like in Congress, there's a Congressional Black Caucus, but there's none for white people.
Frank, it sounds like an easy way to get fired in today's climate. James Sherk, what say you?
Well, I'm curious if you filed an appeal with the Merit Systems Protection Board or a special counsel complaint. I mean, or an Equal Opportunity Employment Commission complaint. I mean, there's multiple avenues to appeal. I mean, as I said, I don't know the full story of what went on, but it is possible to fire a federal employee. It just happens very, very rarely because of all these different appeal options.
And it seems in the current climate that we have, with the insulation and protection that they're adding through this proposal, it's only going to make it more difficult.
Well, only in Washington do you find people who think that the biggest problem with Washington right now is that there's too little accountability in government. I mean, you get more than about 20 miles outside of the Capitol, and that view has very little appeal. Independent, Democrat, Republican, right? It's only in Washington do people think the government is too accountable to the people. I mean, it's ironic that even if you look among federal employees themselves, it's widely recognized that there's a problem with not enough accountability for performance. The government conducts this survey. It's called the Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey. And they conduct it every year. And consistently, the Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey has shown very high dissatisfaction among federal employees with their agency's failure to remove poor performers. It's been the number one or number two pain point in terms of the issues that federal employees identify. And that's somewhat ironically, it was the number one or number two consistent pain point. And then the Biden administration removed that question from the survey at the request of federal employee unions, who basically didn't like the way that people like me were pointing out how federal workers themselves were not happy with the way the system was working. It was interesting. President Trump signed some executive orders in May of 2018 designed to expedite and streamline the federal employee dismissal process and make it easier for agencies to get rid of poor performers. And a magazine based in D.C., it's called Government Executive. It's you could think of it as like the magazine for the swamp, is really what it is. But they conducted a scientific survey. I don't know how many people they had to survey to get a representative sample of federal employees, but they did it. And they asked them, do you approve or disapprove of this executive order Trump signed? It had 2-to-1 support among federal employees. Federal employees, the hardworking federal employees are often the ones most annoyed with the poor performers because they're the ones stuck picking up the slack. And they recognize it's a problem. It shows up all the time in surveys of federal employees. They don't like the system.
Yet the president has all the power through the Constitution to do this stuff, so it's kind of hard to stop unless you've got the right person in the White House. James Sherk, just stick with me for a second because I want to take a quick pause and come back and talk about some of the work you're doing in your particular center at AFPI. So, folks, don't move a muscle. We're coming right back. 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. Valdez. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, America, welcome back. Our guest is James Sherk. He's the former special assistant to President Trump at the White House and for domestic policy. And he's also the director of the Center for American Freedom at the America First Policy Institute. James Sherk, what is the focus of the Center for American Freedom?
Well, a large part of what we work on, obviously, is protecting American freedom. And a large part of that is protecting American freedom from the federal bureaucracy. You've got the administrative state, which to a large extent is handing down rules and dictates governing how Americans live, with very little accountability to voters' elected representatives in Congress. You have a federal bureaucracy, which to a large extent, not completely. And look, in fairness, there are some very good federal civil servants out there who do an excellent job. I want to be clear that they're not all rogues, but unfortunately, one rogue bureaucrat's one too many, and we've got quite a lot, more than one rogue bureaucrat. And so we develop policies to hold the federal bureaucracy accountable and ensure that the next president, if they choose to, will have the tools to require the bureaucracy to carry out their agenda. When President Trump took office, he faced a very hostile bureaucracy, and the tools had not been developed in order to enable him to hold the bureaucracy accountable. If he'd issued that executive order in, say, March of 2017 instead of October of 2020, the next 4 years would have gone very differently, and the bureaucracy would have understood that, look, you'll carry out the president's lawful directives, or you can resign if you want, or you can be fired. But what you don't get to do is sit in your job and try and undermine the policies that the president was elected to carry out. When you have rogue bureaucrats trying to undermine the president's agenda, it's not really the president they're defying. It's the American people.
Right.
Right? Because the president is the one elected by the American people to carry out their agenda. And so it's the votes of every American who cast a vote for that candidate for president who won the election that the bureaucrats are nullifying when they say, we know better. We'll do it our way. And so we're developing policies to make sure that that doesn't happen again.
And overall, the overall mission of the America First Policy Institute, I know you guys are a think tank and very, very proactive on a number of issues, but just tell us a little bit about it.
Certainly. The America First Policy Institute was founded. Our president was my boss in the White House, Brooke Roland. She was the director of the White House Domestic Policy Council under President Trump, and was founded after the election. Went a bit differently than a lot of us had hoped, to continue that America First agenda that we've been pushing for in the White House, and to develop policies that put the American people first. We have a lot of policies, unfortunately, coming out of Washington. Don't really seem to be prioritized on putting America first, but seem to be focused on protecting other interests. And we're continuing that fight. My aspect of it is on this taking on the federal bureaucracy and the administrative state. Other colleagues of mine are focused on, say, border security, where the Biden administration does not seem to care at all about the American people and the consequences of just essentially declaring our border an open border and allowing mass illegal immigration. And so whether it's on immigration, whether it's on the economy, in my case, taking on the administrative state, developing and promoting policies that put the American people first.
And if everybody wants to go to your website and check out what you're doing, where do they go?
www.americafirstpolicy.com. All one word. Very simple. www.americafirstpolicy.com.
All right, folks, check out James Sherk and AFPI at americafirstpolicy.com. James Sherk, I want to thank you for schooling us on what's going on. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
You bet. Have a good night. All right, folks, there is more to come straight ahead. Open Phone America's up next. Don't go anywhere.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. It's Open Phone America. If you want to join us on our late night national town hall conversation, feel free to give us a call, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDES. And in the third and final hour of the program, you get to call in and weigh in on everything under the sun. Whatever you want to talk about is fair game for me, and a couple of things I'm going to put out there. So today, Trump made a campaign stop, and he says, I like this gun. I'd like to buy one of these guns. And quickly the media swooped in and says that he, Trump's buying a gun, but he's not allowed to buy a gun because he's under a federal indictment. And, of course, all he said was he liked the gun and he'd like to buy one. And that became a big to-do. So we'll get into that a little bit later. And, of course, the witnesses have now been named for the first impeachment inquiry hearing that's going to happen on Thursday. So we'll chat a little bit about that as well. And Hillary Clinton, she's made some warnings. She's warning Joe El Baboso Biden about third-party candidates. And that's one I really want to dig into. Because earlier we played a clip of audio. And let's cue it up so we could play it again, of Hillary discussing with Jen Circleback Psaki that, it's kind of like Americans are shopping around for a candidate. And I'm thinking, duh, that's exactly what you're doing during a campaign. But listen to this.
The polling right now for 2024 for the presidential race is tied. Is that something that surprises you or worries you?
No, it doesn't yet. I mean, we're a long way out, and I think there is, a kind of, looking and almost shopping mentality in voters. Like, oh, who am I going to have to vote for? And wait a minute, I'm not happy with that. They're never happy with what the choices are. I've seen that for many years.
So she's seen that for many years. Yeah, I think everybody has seen it for many years, Hillary. Again, this is literally what we do. People are looking for the best candidate possible. And she has a warning, right? There's a warning here. And this is interesting, though, because I think this is actually a very good point, and is what I thought was going on from the very beginning. She's warning Biden and his people about a third-party challenge and that he needs to take it seriously. Now, she feels that she lost the 2016 election in part because of the Green Party nominee, Jill Stein, taking some of her potential votes. The climate crazies might have voted for Clinton if Jill Stein wasn't in the race. So now we feel that, or now she feels that Robert F. Kennedy may be the big threat that peels off some Democrat votes, especially if he runs as an independent after the primary. And that's an interesting place to be. So I'm curious to see how this actually plays out. But Hillary is very, very concerned. And, of course, new poll, I shared that with you earlier, but I'll just reiterate it, just because I think it's, it's just so shocking to me that it comes from the Washington Post and ABC News. If the 2024 presidential election were held today, Trump would win by 10 points, 52% to 42% over Biden. The respondents to the poll had a poor view of Biden's handling of the economy and the border, in addition to his age. Big issues. All big issues that I think are affecting all Americans. I wonder, who would Eric Adams vote for? I don't know. I doubt he's voting for Trump, but I can't see him voting for Biden, right? So it's an interesting thing, this RFK factor. And there was something in this article I wanted to share with you, but it might be escaping me. Let's see if it's still there. If it's not there, it's not there. And we'll continue. But RFK thinks that he hasn't ruled out, is what he said. He hasn't ruled out that he may run as an independent. And I think this is a very interesting proposition because that would be a Ross Perot of sorts, potentially. And I'm wondering what you think. If that does in fact happen, does that mean they tank Biden and Harris? If Biden is ultimately the nominee, or whomever the Democrat is, would RFK Jr. be responsible for toppling the Democrat because of his third-party campaign? I don't know, but I'd like to get your thoughts on that. Let's hit the phones. Let's see what we got here. Where are we going? We got New York City, Evergreen, Montana. Frank is back. Mitchell, South Dakota. Let's go to Mitchell, South Dakota, KORN. Let's go to Rob.
Good evening.
Good evening, Rob. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. I was wondering if you saw the story about the Ford project with the electrical vehicle initiative plant there that was shut down today. $3.5 billion construction project.
No, I haven't seen it. But what are your thoughts on the scenario we just discussed with RFK Jr. and his independent run? Do you think it's an evil thing for him to do that, to run, or is it fair game? Does he tank Biden? Should he get out of the race? What are your thoughts?
No, I think it's fair game. I think anybody that has a voice should be out there. I would be if I was not, in the situation I am here, if I had the ability to travel and get out there.
Yeah, I hear that. Now, all right, so we're looking at the case here that you're talking about. This story is about they hit pause on the construction of a electric vehicle battery plant in Marshall. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, sir.
And what are your thoughts on it?
No securities. Well, Fox reported that also the national security threat kind of humiliated Congress into forcing it to happen because it's exposed both the Republicans and the Democrats' involvement with the Communist Party of China. And now these bribery stories, tie them into it as well.
And this is the
slavery aspect.
And you're talking about this plant that is going to build batteries for everybody. However, like the majority owner was a Chinese investor, correct?
Right. It's just another foothold for the CCP, the Communist Party, to establish in the USA. And then, the the electronics intrusion, if you know a little bit about how all those systems work in a vehicle, people are under nonstop monitoring.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. Somebody that I know recently had a conversation with told me they bought an electric car, or not an electric car, a hybrid car. And even that car has some kind of stealth surveillance going on where they got a call from the dealer saying, hey, it's time. I just got a notification from your car telling me that it's time for your 10,000-mile oil change or servicing and whatever. And they were thinking, how would my car tell you? And obviously the car is communicating back to the dealership, unlike back in the days where they'd say, suggested servicing is at, 10,000 miles, 20,000 miles, whatever. The car now tells them what's going on. You got these Teslas that record. Well, if you get your car keyed up or whatever, the car is recording everything. It's recording all the time. And I think this is something a lot of people don't know. I recently learned that modems, I don't think they do it anymore because they got caught, but modems were sensing motion and were able to turn on and off based on these motion sensors, and people knew when and how people were in your house because of the movement that they were detecting. So this type of smart technology, and of course Alexa is all intrusive. I feel like there's a lot of it, and so much of it's being invited into the home by people who enjoy the convenience of not even going through their phone or to log on at their desktop to order something from Alexa on Amazon, and they just are able to shout it, and Alexa does it for you right away. But I'm always concerned about how in China they kind of force that on you with the surveillance state that they have going on, the police state. But here we're creating whether it's the bribery of the Biden family or whatever you have, we're super sympathetic to the CCP, their policies, their products. They have a monopoly on the minerals that are needed to make these batteries. And it seems like all we do is hear about this incessant push towards making more and more EVs and trying to require them. And ultimately, I feel like, how are you ever going to get away from anybody? If the cops have a kill switch or something and, okay, we're going to pull you over, we're just going to stop your car. And I know they have some electromagnetic pulse type of technology that can do that now, but it's expensive and it's not easy. I think with EVs, it would be very easy. So to your point, I think you're right. This is a play right into the hands of the communist Chinese. And putting it on pause, I think, is a good thing. I just don't know that it's going to be paused forever. What say you?
I think it should be paused forever for several reasons. First of all, we have those rare earth items here. The problem is the slave labor, like silver, for example. The reason it doesn't rise in value is because it requires slave labor, basically, because they can't. It's a break-even proposition. That's the problem with cobalt and lithium and all these things. So there's that aspect, and then there's the grid aspect where there's just cannot sustain charging all these vehicles. So it's become a item where they were trying to stimulate the economy, I believe, and give people like, hey, let's turn your attention to this because we're trying to shut down fossil fuels. But now I think it's opened up a national security rift where they're forced to prosecute it, whereas they were trying to use this as a way to stimulate the economy.
I think you're 100% right. Excellent point. I thank you for the call. Big shout out to Mitchell, South Dakota, and everybody on KORN. We're going to continue with your calls and more straight ahead. Don't go anywhere. The number 833-482-5337.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
My hands across America to the liberty-loving Latino, Rich Valdez.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. Taking your calls and more on all of these topics, 833-482-5337. And the last caller said that China's making headway in the United States. I tend to agree. Do we really want the communist Chinese making headway? It seems like they've doled out enough cash to the White House. I don't know. Let's go to Brooklyn, New York, WFAS, and check in with Alex. Go right ahead.
Hey, Rich, thanks for taking the call. I want to comment about Bob Menendez, who also took money, but not from China, from Egypt. But you were talking about RFK and
you mean Gold Bar Bob? Yes, Gold Bar Bob.
Yeah. But I also want to comment about RFK, which you mentioned. I think he's going to run as an independent, and he's not going to have, 90% of Democrats voting for him like he has now in the polls in the primary, because if he runs as an independent, he'll lose some of these people. But you have a lot of these Democrats that said that they're looking for a different option because Joe Biden is not an option when he destroyed so much in this country. And so they looked around, they found RFK, who was not a typical Democrat that was running, and now they bought into him and they won't be leaving him. And I think a nice couple of percent of them, if he runs as an independent, they'll vote for him. But what has been going on here for the last, half a year or more, with Joe Biden being the only typical Democratic candidate and the DNC not setting up a debate when RFK is polling at 20% against Joe Biden, which would say, hey, you got to do a debate. It's just typical when you see how so many people in the party are saying they want a different choice. The fact that there's no other typical Democratic candidate in the race shows you how undemocratic the Democratic Party is, because the handlers aren't allowing, I believe, for Gavin Newsom, Cory Booker, or any other typical Democrats to get into the race. And they're saying, hey, we're the handlers. We put Joe Biden in here. We have the media under our hands. If you go into the race, which Gavin Newsom is dying to get into, we'll besmirch you in the media, will come out against you, and we won't, back you up, and you'll be over. Gavin Newsom is dying to get in, right? He would be in this race if he had a choice to get in, and they're not allowing him to get in, which shows you how undemocratic the Democratic Party is, because one of the main things in the United States and why it's so democratic is because we have a choice in the election, and the government is put in place by the people, and they're telling their voters, no, you don't have a choice. But I also want to comment about Bob Menendez, because
what do you think about Gold Bar Bob?
yeah, with all the money he's made, and it still hasn't been proven 100%. So, innocent until proven guilty. I think it needs to be applied by everybody. But if it's true that he got all that money,
it's true that he has gold bars.
Allegedly. Yeah, okay, but if he got it from Egypt and they gave it to him because they wanted to bribe him, then he made a big mistake. And his mistake was that he took money from Egypt as opposed from China. And he thought he'll get away with it because he's a Democrat. But the thing is, the Democratic Party, a lot of people there are bought out by the Chinese, not Egypt. And so if you're Joe Biden that's getting money from China or another Democrat, the DOJ is not going to go after you because a lot of people in the DOJ are bought out by China as well. And Democratic politicians are not going to try to get you canceled like they're doing to Bob Menendez. And you saw how they're defending Joe Biden and Hunter Biden. And because there's an establishment in the Democratic Party that's for China because of all the money they made, but you don't have that kind of defense when you take money from Egypt. So I think the mistake he made is he took the money from the wrong country.
That's an excellent point.
That's what I think.
Thank you, Alex. I appreciate it. Big shout out to WFAS, our New York affiliate, the flagship where this show originates from. And I think you're right. And I want to get into a little bit of, you mentioned Bob Menendez. I want to get into a little bit of his defense of himself. Let me check with the control room. Do we have time for that audio now? I guess we'll play it when we come back. But Bob Menendez, he was out there today, and he, he's just reminding everybody that just like Trump, he is innocent until proven guilty. And, I thought it was interesting that he was saying, that he's innocent until he's proven guilty, despite being indicted alongside his wife. Just imagine the doghouse you would be in if, you get locked up with your wife and then you're like, listen, I'm innocent. not we're innocent. I'm innocent. I don't know. I think that one's not going to land too well. Who knows if she becomes the cooperating witness and says, no, he's not innocent. It was him. Or maybe he's going to say, no, it was her. And I wouldn't put it past anybody, but I'd love to see how that plays out. We're also going to get into, continuation of our conversation on the administrative state, the permanent Washington, as Kash Patel called it, the federal bureaucracy and how we can combat that. And it seems like it's unending. And I'm sure it is unending, but somehow we have to get our hands around it one way or another. And I see that we have a caller that wants to talk about nanovolts and cell phones. I'm interested in getting into that as well. So we're going to get into all of that stuff straight ahead. Of course, our phone number, 866-505-4626, 866-50-JIMBO. That's the legacy line. You're welcome to use that phone number, of course, or 833-4-VALDEZ. They ring in the same place, but love to give honor and pay homage. Folks, more to come straight ahead. Check out our website, Rich Valdez, AmericaAtNight.com, Rich Valdez, AmericaAtNight.com. We're coming right back with more of your calls and more on the hottest stories of the day here on America at Night with me, Rich Valdez. Don't go anywhere.
Voted best head of hair in live late night radio 6 years in a row. It's Rich Valdez.
First, a cornerstone of the foundation of American democracy and our justice system is the principle that all people are presumed innocent until proven guilty. All people. I ask for nothing more and deserve nothing less. The court of public opinion is no substitute for our revered justice system. We cannot set aside the presumption of innocence for political expediency when the harm is irrevocable. To those
Menendez is saying that we can't use the court of public opinion for political expediency. What is it that we're doing to President Trump? Right? I mean, it's the court of public opinion. It's the court of law. They're using everything they can, right? So he's been indicted federally. So has Trump. But yet somehow for him, it's like, hey, look, no, listen, I've done nothing wrong. When Trump says, I've done nothing wrong. It's like, no, you're guilty as sin. Lock him up, throw away the key. Yeah, I just think it's such a double standard. Go right ahead.
Those who have rushed to judgment, you have done so based on a limited set of facts framed by the prosecution to be as salacious as possible. Remember, prosecutors get it wrong sometimes. Sadly, I know that. Instead of waiting for all the facts to be presented, others have rushed to judgment because they see a political opportunity for themselves or those around them. All I humbly ask for in this moment, in my colleagues in Congress, the elected leaders and the advocates of New Jersey that I have worked with for years, as well as each person who calls New Jersey home, is to pause and allow for all the facts to be presented.
So Bob Menendez says, look, he's got he's innocent. He's innocent. He's innocent. He went on to say things like, listen, I'm Cuban. And because I'm Cuban, we fled communism. That's my family's history. So we always keep money stuffed in our, in our winter coats and stuff like that. And I always keep a couple of gold bars around. So what if you want to call him Gold Bar Bob? Hey, I listen. I'm not mad at anybody for having gold bars. I just think when they come from the Egyptian government, because you were doing something favorable for their government as chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, I think you're going to have, what is that Ricky Ricardo said? You're going to have some splaining to do, man. You're going to have some splaining to do. Because, Bobby, no good, no bueno. It doesn't seem like this is a good move. I'd love to have Bob Menendez on the program to explain his innocence. Perhaps he'll join me. I don't know. I'm going to ask the team to make sure that we try to make that happen. Because that would be a really riveting interview, I think. We could ask him some really interesting questions, see what type of answers we get. I doubt he'll answer many because today he gave a kind of prepared statement, didn't answer any questions. Bob says he didn't do it. What say you? Let's go to Matt. He's near Morehead City, North Carolina, WTKF. Go right ahead.
Hello, Rich. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, Matt. Thanks.
Very good. Well, I have some pointers about Bob Menendez. First of all, what you just said, if you will, I'd love to hear him on your program, too, because I know what it costs to live in New Jersey.
Me too.
And, yeah, unfortunately, I had a plea there. But this Bob Menendez thing, who says it's not out of his savings account? I mean, we don't know. And where's the proof? It was the Egyptian government that the bribes. And what about the $20 million allegedly that the Biden crime family bribery? What's your opinion?
Well, I think that's exactly what that's why he's saying he's innocent until proven guilty, which he is. And this is why federal prosecutors are going to have to prove beyond any reasonable doubt that this came from that stuff. Now, we had the former head, the chief of the organized crime section of the Department of Justice, Jim Trusty. He was on Thursday or Friday. And, he's prosecuted a number of bribery cases. And he was saying that this indictment, what he said was he'd seen indictments with a lot shorter of an indictment that weren't so long and so lengthy. And they got convictions on bribery. And he's saying this one is painstakingly filled with details. And he explained why. He said, A, they want to make a strong case. B, they're looking to really make an example out of Menendez. And C, they want to litigate this in the court of public opinion. They want to sway the public so that it seems like he's guilty as sin, dead to rights. Now, the issue, I think, that I asked him, are they going to have a problem proving it? He said, probably not, because they have a lot of information. They tend to already have a cooperating witness, and we're hearing Menendez speak as if he's the only person that was indicted, and he was indicted with his wife. So to me, that's very telling. He hasn't claimed any innocence for his wife. He didn't say, my wife and I are innocent. This is what we do. I didn't hear a we in there at all. So maybe Menendez becomes the cooperating witness and says, look, And we talked about that with Jim Trusty. If you missed that interview, check it out, richvaldesamericaatnight.com. But part of what he said was maybe Menendez will use that as a plea to say, I didn't know that they came after her to try to, in terms of espionage, trying to get at the wife of the chair of the Foreign Relations Committee to influence her. And they were bribing her at thinking that it would influence me. And, I found out when you guys told me. I had no idea this was going on. He may try to claim that. I just think that, typically the FBI doesn't arrest you until they know what's going on. And when they ask you questions, they already know the answers. And they just want to see if you're lying so they can add more charges. So I think that there's a lot more that they have that will come out during discovery and whatnot. And we'll see how it goes. But I don't think they would have brought a second case against Menendez after the first one, which was also lengthy, ended in a hung jury, unless they felt that they had him dead to rights and that they could nail him. So we'll see how it goes. Again, he is Menendez. He's an extremely skilled politician. He's a very smart guy. I'm not a fan of his, but I can tell you, he knows his way around courts. He knows his way around politics, and he's adept at navigating the swamp. So we'll see what happens there. But the idea that it's expensive to live in New Jersey, so I've got my gold bars just hanging out in my house, or I keep loads of cash stuffed in my jacket, or whatever the case is. Again, I imagined that he was going to use these types of defenses because I would, right? What would you say if, hey, we found a ton of cash. Oh, I like to go out. I don't know. I like to go buy things in cash. Whatever the story is. It's like, when kids get caught smoking weed, they're like, no, why do you got rolling papers? No, I like to roll my own cigarettes. Okay, sure you do. That type of thing. So I think they ultimately have to prove it, and I think they will. That's just my thought. I don't think they would have brought a second case if they couldn't get him on this one. He's not Trump. With Trump, they'll bring the case. Doesn't matter. They could slow him down in the election, tarnish him with a black eye. I don't think that's the case with Menendez, Matt.
Okay, thank you. Well, it's like what we said. There's nothing illegal about it, but anybody leaves money in their house is an idiot.
Yeah. Well, I think the illegality here is, the appearance of impropriety, and that they have people saying that this happened. They have part of the indictment talks about him interfering in a New Jersey state criminal investigation to protect I think it was a real estate developer or something like that, or a builder that he had some arrangement with. So there's a lot more that's in there. And again, it's a lengthy indictment. I haven't read it. I skimmed through it the day it came out, and the day we discussed it on the air. And I'm curious to see how it plays out as well. I don't want to see an innocent man go to jail, but I definitely want to see a corrupt politician be held accountable. It's about time. Thank you, Matt. Folks, we're going to continue with your calls straight ahead. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
Mr. Valdez, you have one of the greatest shows that radio's ever had.
America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
So last week or a week before that, we spoke about how the IRS has these armed agents now, part of the 80,000 new agents, or 88,000 or whatever the number is. And I take an exception to that from the initial proposal of that. And in a training exercise, two of these guys that it was originally speculated that they weren't going to have the same type of rigorous training that most federal law enforcement officers have, that they were taking people. And there were some videos going around that I thought were a parody. but there were some really, out of shape looking people that didn't look like law enforcement professionals. And I said, man, they're going to give these people guns. And they were there playing with guns, using them the wrong way. It just didn't look right. And I thought, man, somebody's going to get hurt. Well, we found out that, one agent shot another agent and killed him. And that was horrible. And it's still horrible. And today, out of Fulton County, an investigator for District Attorney Funny Willis accidentally shot herself in the bathroom of the courthouse. Listen to this. An investigator with the Fulton County District Attorney's Office shot herself by accident while inside the county courthouse on Friday. Crazy. The same courthouse where President Trump and his co-defendants were recently arraigned in Georgia on the bogus charges that they put against them, the RICO racketeering charges. According to authorities, the investigator accidentally shot herself in the leg while inside the fourth-floor handicap bathroom stall. Unbelievable. How do you do that? She was not critically wounded. A Fulton County Sheriff's Office deputy responded and administered aid until EMS arrived. The Sheriff's Department said in a statement, there was never an active threat at the courthouse. No, she was the only threat was this investigator to herself. On whether or not criminal charges would be filed, former prosecutor Ash Joshi told the Post-Millennial that it was an accident. The shooting was an accident. So there's no intent to commit a crime. Unfortunately for the investigator, she was the only one who was shot. I wonder why that would be unfortunately. I guess it's unfortunate that she got shot. It almost sounds like, unfortunately, she's the only one that got shot. Should we have shot somebody else? Anyway, the Atlanta police said the investigation remains ongoing. The employee's name has not been released. Of course not. Why would we release any of that information? Nobody wants to know who the cop that shot herself in the bathroom is, right? Anyway, crazy stuff. Where else are we going here? There was Biden on climate change. Not interested. Here's a good one. This is one I wanted to share with you a little earlier. I'll do that in maybe in the next segment because we got a couple of callers I want to get to. Let's go to Sedona, Arizona, listening on KFNX 1100 in Phoenix. Let's go to Pat. Pat, how are you, sir?
Just fine, Rich. As always, a great show.
Oh,
you are the man, I'll tell you.
I appreciate
it seems like, you bring up a good discussion about what are we going to do with these guys, how are we going to prosecute them, how are we going to get them. They're folding one layer after another of protection. Well, let's put it this way.
You're talking about the federal bureaucracy now, right?
Yes. Like you were talking about how they're trying to get all these things that makes them immune from prosecution. And I'll tell you.
And also immune from getting fired.
Fired. Oh, yeah. But everybody knows that. I mean, it's been like that for I don't know how long. I mean, it's ridiculous. But, I mean, these people, they do it. Now, I want federal employees who probably are listening that I believe not a very small percentage of them are these people. These people are in key positions. They're higher ups. They're probably good at harassing people and scaring them for their jobs. There's a lot of people because there's a lot of whistleblowers. So that means there's got to be very good people in the FBI, the CIA, the DOJ. I mean, the higher ups, no. I mean, they're all corrupt. And I tell you what, they're not going to get away with it, Rich. They're not going to get away with it. Eventually, this dishonesty in criminality will decay them away. Their families.
I hope you're right,
apart.
because I tend to think you're right in so much as I think there's a lot of people that say, "Hey, look, I want a good job. I'll serve my country. I'll work in the federal government. Why not? Sounds like a good deal to me." And there are a number of people in life that I've encountered. The majority, in fact, are apolitical people. They don't care about politics. They care about sports. They care about their kids. They care about anything but politics because, A, they don't trust crook A or crook B, the crook from the red team or the crook from the blue team. And that's just how so many people look at things. It's why our voter turnout is always so minimal in a country that has, way more registered voters or even people that are eligible to be registered as voters. than actually turn out on presidential elections, let alone any other election. So I agree with you. I think there's a lot of good people out there, and that's why you see so many people that are, fulfilling their patriotic duty to say, you know what, if I see something, I'm saying something. And I think there'd probably be more whistleblowers, but for the fact that people are afraid to lose their job. They're afraid to be marginalized, or even worse, keep their job but be miserable in it and be, sent to the quote-unquote Siberia of the federal government. And I think that's a reality. Anyway, Pat, I appreciate you listening in. Always a pleasure to hear from you. Big shout-out to everybody in Arizona. And we're going to continue our conversation straight ahead. Don't move a muscle.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. It's the speed round. Let's go to Scott, Charleston, South Carolina, WTMA. Scott, go right ahead.
Rich, the Menendez earlier today said that he took this money out of his bank account, this legally earned money over 30 years. If that's true, it will be easy to prove because currency has dates on it as like a series, and it's signatures from that. So if he has stacks of old currency, that'll be easy to prove or disprove. And I'd also like to mention what they found in his freezer. You know what they found?
What?
A lasagna from Carmela. A lasagna from Carmela Soprano.
That was a little thank you, and it had a nail file inside, just in case, Bobby, just in case Gold Bars Bob gets locked up. There's a little nail file in there from Carmela. Oh, that's good, Scott. Thank you, brother. I appreciate that. Oh, that was good. Frank, Evergreen, Montana, KOFI. Go right ahead, sir, quickly.
Okay, certainly. I want to just say that lithium batteries are alkaline batteries. Lithium is an alkali, and there's lots of it in Montana, just thousands of tons of it. And we have these alkali flats areas in eastern Montana. Mm-hmm. You can't drink the water. It'll kill you. And the average age of someone back in those days in the 1800s was probably 21 years old, because there weren't very many water wells in those days. But it's
so you're saying we could mine that stuff and make our own electric car batteries?
Yes, indeed. And basically, it's cell phones are crystal radios.
It's a good point with that. I think there's so many resources that the United States has. I mean, the California gold rush happened here, right? California. So, I mean, there's so much natural resources in our country, and yet this administration seems to not want to pursue any of them in favor of helping China, in favor of importing oil and other forms of energy, and it bewilders me every day. Frank in Evergreen, Montana, KOFI, thank you. Hasta la próxima. Take care. Good night. And God bless. I am Rich Valdez. We'll do it all again tomorrow.